balance is something we're not really able to achieve. It's awareness of imbalance. Seasons of life, not all time is equal. And for women in general, it's about feeling okay that you're good enough, that you don't have to be extraordinary relative to your male counterparts. I think it's unfair pressure that a lot of women feel that I've got to do all of this. And if you have the capacity to do it and you have the supports to do it, awesome. But it's also okay to just show up and be the best version of a mother, founder, wife, support network, and or in some cases, the leader.
Hey, it's Renee. Welcome to the Into the Wild Show, the podcast for women who want to build incredible mental strength to level up their business and lifestyle. I'm Renee Warren, the founder of We Wild Women, author, speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and your host. Together, we will make you unapologetic about shining your light, growing your business, and turning you into a wildly confident and successful leader. This is for you, the visionary, the go-getter, the entrepreneur, and for those that need a real kick in the butt to get going and to dream bigger. Each week, I bring in leading experts and entrepreneurs to help you take leaps in the right direction, because I know the best advice comes from someone who has successfully done it before. So, are you ready to level up? Welcome to Into the Wild. Hey, you wild women. I have something new and exciting happening over here at Into the Wild. For the first time, I'm welcoming a man other than my husband as a guest on this show. Why? Because I realized how many great men have influenced my life, whether that's in business, in parenting, as a partner, or in fitness, and I didn't want to exclude them from this growing stage. Today's guest is an award-winning entrepreneur, angel investor, thought leader, and sought-after business coach. In 2008, he founded and scaled Canada's top toy company called Tech for Kids, and subsequently co-founded Pela, the sustainable phone case startup that created a $100 million new category. In 2021, Brad and the team at Pela successfully launched a record-breaking $9.7 million crowdsourced campaign for the Lomi, the world's first smart waste kitchen composter. Brad has a passion for faith, fitness, adventure, and outdoor pursuits, and lives in the mountains of British Columbia with his amazing wife, where they are building a beautiful life. In this episode, we discuss Brad's new book called Startup Santa, how he explains in detail his quality of life quadrant, and why he says success is a sucky teacher. Please welcome the incredible Brad Pedersen.
Renee, I am so excited to be here for so many reasons. Because number one, I'm a fan of what you're doing and what you're trying to do in terms of empowering women, but all humans, because you definitely inspire me in terms of how you live your life. And we do life together, which is so great. Your husband is one of my best friends. And so we spend a lot of time together, and I'm just excited to unpack the possibilities of today.
Yeah. So we have a date night on Tuesday, the four of us. And I just have to preface this. I know the original version of my podcast was women only, except for my husband. But here's why I love Brad. It's because he's going to drop so many amazing one-liners. So ladies, get your books ready. But I think he knew this of my podcast too, when he replied to an email and he's like, hey, maybe it's time to get me on your show. And I'm like, but no, it's only women. But what got me thinking about the ultimate yes, because it ended up being like a gut intuitive yes, was that by only having women on the show, which is, it's fine, we still do, I'm ignoring some of the men in my life that were pivotal to certain facets of my life that got me to the next level, whether it was in business or parenting or understanding how to live my life. And how Dan and I both look up to you and Kelly and how you guys live your life, because if anybody meets Brad, they would never guess how old he is, because he lives life like he can never pull a muscle or break a bone. He's like a 25-year-old dude, but he's done all the things. And so you're on the show because you've inspired my husband and I know that you'll inspire this audience. So welcome.
Awesome. I'm, like I said, very excited to be here, and hopefully we share some wisdom, mostly from my wounds, but certainly it's going to be fun having the conversation and seeing if we can create some value for your audience.
Oh yeah. And you've got wounds to share. Emotional wounds, physical wounds. Oh, the one thing that impresses me the most about you was you had a snowbiking injury that was pretty extensive a few years ago, and you were laid on your couch because you had to recover. And what did you do in the time when you were bored on your couch?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of just being, I think when you're born, this question is whether founders are born or made. And I kind of feel like they're more born. I think there's a combination of both, but people who have inspiration to imagine a better future don't sit still well for long. So, I was laid up as your husband was with me, helped carry me off the mountain from that day. And, I just don't sit around well. So I went back to my kind of list of things that I had wanted to do before my life had expired, because I'm a big believer that I want to wear out and not rust out. And on my list was to become a pilot. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to be laid up for a bit. So why don't I start doing my ground training now? And as I begin to heal, that'll, give me the opportunity and accessibility to get into airplanes. And so, yeah, I use that downtime to actually grow my experience, my skill set, and successfully became a pilot.
That's crazy. I would have used it for every reason to just watch Netflix all day and eat chips.
Well, I think that certainly has its place, and I definitely don't poo-poo having nights down and out. In fact, I think sometimes there's too much virtue signaling about how productive and busy we are. And my wife and I have come to learn that in order to go fast, you have to learn to go slow. So having those down days is important, so you can go and perform at a high level. And for us, that's often like, sitting around enjoying a bottle of wine and just, taking in all the beauty or the reminiscing on magic memories, because I love to create a lot of those. But yeah, when you don't have those downtimes, then you got to just get after things and make the most of it, because, today is the first day of the rest of your life and you can't ever get back tomorrow. I once heard somebody say that tomorrow is a promissory note. Yesterday is a canceled check. Today is the only cash you have to invest versus spend. And I choose to invest it. Most people want to spend it. Like they talk about spending time. I'm just not a fan of that. You should be investing your time into creating more value for your life and those around you.
Yeah, Dan's a lot like that. And I feel like you've inspired him on some of those levels to the point where, gosh, I would say almost after Max was born. So like 10-ish, 9-ish years ago, he would get chronically sick at least 3 times a year. And he would be in bed for anywhere from like 4 to 6 days. And he would just, binge House. He just loved watching the show House. I don't know. But what of the last evolution of the last 4 years is when we had those down moments, if we were sick, the quickest way to recovery was to actually be investing our time. Yes, like you said, there are days when you need to be in bed with your feet up and you need to pop a couple Advil. But I think that we've really over cushioned those moments of downtime. And I think of those days when I'm like, I've got a headache or I'm dizzy and I lay in bed, I was like, oh, today would be the day to just not do anything. But when I get myself out of bed, I feel better. And I get into the gym, I feel better. And then I think to myself, I can't believe I even thought about spending the day in bed, because now today's the best day ever.
Yeah, you just hit on something so important. And I just want to kind of double down on that, which is action precedes feelings. If I choose to do nothing, I will tend to just feel what that felt sense is in the moment, which is discouraged, right? I feel sick. I'm thinking about, how terrible I am in that moment, how little energy I have, all the negativities that come along with that kind of scarcity thinking. And when you force yourself into activity to move, isn't it amazing that on the other side of that, suddenly I feel energetic, I feel alive, I feel grateful, I feel like, wow, I'm glad I did that. I know you and Dan are incredibly disciplined with your fitness and you work out. For most of my life, I've been that way. But for me, it's not because I really want to. In fact, there's many mornings, like this morning, I went for a 6K run. It's raining outside right now. It's cold and wet, which is really unusual for where we live. And I didn't feel like doing it because of that. In fact, when I stepped out of the house, I was like, ooh, it's cold. My hands are, I don't know that maybe I should get gloves. But it's amazing. After that 6K, I felt energized. I felt alive. I felt grateful. I felt all the opposite of everything I was feeling preceding that. So if we just let our feelings, the initial feeling kind of set precedents, then we're never or ever going to get on the other side of exploring the possibilities of what's within us. And unfortunately, that's where most people go, is that they don't feel like it. They let their feelings in the moment decide what they do and how they behave. But what we all intuitively know is that if we actually have the courage to step into the unknown, into the uncomfortable, on the other side of that, the feelings are exactly the opposite and are really what allow us to not just survive, but thrive as humans.
Yeah, it's like jumping into a cold plunge, right? The first 30 seconds are terrible. Then you get past this threshold and it gets to a point where it feels okay. Still hurts. But when you step out and you warm up, that feeling, holy, it is like something else. It's like you're born again.
100%.
Except my husband keeps my cold plunge way too cold. He keeps it at like 3. I think it's supposed to be at 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way Dan's wired.
Yeah. And the first time I remember, like, I jumped in and I was like, I lasted 20 seconds. And he's like, that's not the way you do it. And I was like, okay, here we go. We literally just got it. He jumps in the cold tub and he goes right under. He gets his whole head and body right under and he sits there for like 20 seconds and he gets out and he's shaking his head. He's like, oh, that was stupid. Oh my gosh, that hurt so much. He had an ice cream headache. And he was out for like 10 minutes.
Yeah. Man, we have so many stories. Do you remember the quadropolis when one day we did?
Yes, I talk about it all the time. When we try to sell Kelowna to people, it's like, hey, did you know that you can do this in a day?
Well, I still distinctly remember Dan. I know we're getting into a bit of a rabbit hole here, but that day, so we started off skiing in the morning. We went mountain biking early afternoon. Then we went wake surfing. And then we ended up at a winery for an evening. So all 4 events in one day was pretty great. But it was April 4th and the water was just above freezing. And most of us are wearing wetsuits, dry suits, but Dan shows up and he's going to do the Wim Hof. And he jumped in the water and I'm not sure that he didn't bounce, actually. It was pretty cold. So yeah, love Dan for that.
Wasn't that the day JR wore a whole like winter jacket in to go wake surfing?
He did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you men. Anyways, so Brad has one of my favorite quotes in the world called, I want to die young as late as possible. And we were just explaining some of the examples of how you live your life. So when did this come to you and how has this kind of been threaded into the way that you show up every day?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, it kind of comes back to, was I made this way or is this a path I've chosen? And I would say I've always been a kid at heart. And my wife still accuses me of being just a big kid. And that's probably why I got into the toy business. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But I've just always been very much about pushing possibilities, a bit mischievous, actually. I ended up getting in trouble quite a bit as a kid. Not bad trouble, like, go to jail kind of trouble, but, doing things that probably would have, I got the strap 3 times when I was in grade school. So I think that says something. And a part of that is just exploring the possibilities, just being curious, and then also having the courage to just lean in and try. And my father inspired me that by the way he lived his life. He was a very adventurous person. He loved the outdoors. My parents used to take me winter camping. Like I look at that now and I go, that's almost like child abuse. I don't know who does that, but
Yeah, I don't like that
in
idea.
Canada, it's consequential, right? If you go to the wrong part of the world and you run out of ways to stay warm, I mean, in the winter when it's minus 30 or 40, that's a problem. And I think that speaks to parenting, which we may or may not get into in this conversation about how, as parents, we need to inspire our kids by the way we live our lives, that they don't care so much about what we say, but they'll definitely watch what we do, right? That's going to be a big part of it. And then the other thing my father was really into was in personal development. He was constantly consuming good books, listening to audio cassettes at the time. I mean, I'm dating myself. Before there was podcasts and all that stuff, there was books that went to CDs and finally other things, but just consuming good content. And he was a big believer. Like he said, CNN stands for constantly negative news. Like there's the world and then there's your world. Choose to focus on the things that you can control because you can't control the world, but you can control your world. So consume things that are going to help you be better at your world. And then just living life to its full. Right. And that's a part of my belief system and a part of my faith that I believe that we were called to live a life to the full. And one of my mentors, Jim Rohn, used to say this quote, and it haunted me. He said, in life, you may not be able to do all you find out, but make sure you find out all you can do. And the reason that haunted me is I started thinking, like, when I get to the end of my life, am I really going to have packed all the possibilities within me? Or am I going to leave it behind? Because it's said that the wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard. Because that's where most people have gone without exploring the full potential that was within them. Books not written, businesses not started, songs not sung, just the things that they were capable of, but they chose not to actually empower humanity by releasing it out there. So I know it's not easy because, of course, it takes courage and it gets you out of your comfort zone and this four-letter word we don't love called work. But that's a part of just becoming the best and brightest version of yourself. So I've just chosen to live my life in a way that keeps me youthful, young at heart. I mean, Jesus called us to be like little children. And what I think he really meant by that is, children have incredible imagination, incredible curiosity, incredible possibilities. As a kid, there was nothing you couldn't do. You could imagine anything. And then incredible faith and hope, right? So I think what happens, though, is that we all kind of become realists. We go through life, we have a few tough things thrown our way. And then Benjamin Franklin said most people die at age 25. They just wait to 70 to get buried. They become zombies. They become the walking dead. So I just never want to end up like that. I just want to make sure that when I get to the end of my life, that I've explored all the possibilities, that I've soaked up all the good things that life has to offer, and then squeezed it dry of every possibility that's within me. And just one more thought on that, because I think it makes sense. There's a book out there called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And it's written by a palliative care nurse from Australia who noticed a pattern when talking to patients at their end of life. And in that, she started to document it, and it became this incredible book. And I thought, wow, what an amazing thing to have, because of course we're all headed there. Like we're all on a path that has the same outcome. There's a terminal outcome to all our lives, right? So what can I learn from these people who are just that much further down the path? And the thing that blew me away, of the top 5 regrets of the dying, which I thought, okay, they're going to have made a mistake. They started a business and they screwed up, or they tried something that just took them down the wrong path. Of the top 5 regrets of dying, 4 of the 5 were for things they didn't do, not things they did. The only thing that they regretted doing was working too much. And so, yeah, I want to die young, as late as possible, live a life fully, and make sure that, for me, work and play become basically congruent, that you really can't even tell when I am working and when I'm playing. I mean, I just spent a weekend with your husband, mountain biking. We were heli biking and doing all this amazing stuff. And I got so many inspiring ideas from our conversations. We were playing hard, just big kids, riding bikes through the mud, down a mountain. I mean, how great is that? And riding helicopters to get there. But in between, we're discussing like our dreams and our inspiration and vision for the future. And it's awesome. So you're just blurring the lines of what is actually work and what is play.
Yeah. And I think it was, who said it best? I would think it was Ed Milet that said something like the 9 to 5 was a construct of what was required of business developed out of the Industrial Revolution, because we needed to have labor to manufacture. And so I know in my mind, in my circle of friends, is we think that we're not productive or efficient or can grow our businesses unless we're working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And you're somebody, and my husband's somebody, and there's so many other, even women in this space, that'll be out surfing the ocean on Wednesday, and they're not working. I'm like, how do they get to do that? The reality is we all get to do that. We just choose not to. I wouldn't be surfing. That's just an example. but the point is and I still find myself doing this. I love going to CrossFit at lunchtime because it breaks up my day. But sometimes I'm in the gym and I'm like, oh no, if a client needs to reach me, they can't because I'm doing push-ups or pull-ups. It's never been an issue for anybody. Yeah, I still keep telling myself that I need to be available all the time. And I do believe that women are notorious for this. And if it's not for business, it's for work or in relationships or whatnot, the give mentality. From your perspective, any advice on that?
So first of all, I think there's seasons for life. Just like there's the seasons of the calendar, I think there are seasons of life. And not all time is equal, particularly when you're starting and scaling a business. But the most important thing is being in integrity to your values. And what are your values? Your values are where you invest your time. Ultimately, what you say about how important things only matters to the extent of what you do and the time invested in that, right? So for many, many years, I was out of integrity because I would say my family was my highest priority. And yet, if you looked at my calendar, that simply was not true based on how I was investing my time. But also, when you're starting a startup, that is a different time and season than when you're not. And to get one of Elon's rockets off the ground, they say that 90% of the fuel is burned up in just getting it outside of the atmosphere. So it's important to actually understand there's going to be an extraordinary amount of effort at the beginning to achieve escape velocity to get that rocket where it needs to go. Likewise, when you're starting a business or a venture, in the beginning, there is going to be an extraordinary amount that's required of you to actually get that thing going. But you also know that that's not sustainable. You can't burn hot. If you run your engine on your car, red line all the time, it will break. It's just not a sustainable path forward. So it's about having agreements with yourself first, and then with those that are impacted, understanding that for that season, you're going to be out of balance. It's what's required for that moment, for the extended period of time, that you're aware of that out of balance, but that on the other side of that, that you will come back into a balanced, a more balanced state. So, I've turned 50. I'm at a season in my life where I've accomplished some things. I've created some means that have given me more flexibility than when I was back in my 20s and 30s, still scaling my companies. And so I recognize that where I am today is different from somebody who's talking to me, who's like a young founder saying, hey, I'm in startup mode. I want to go ride snow bikes in the middle of the week. And I'm like, well, have you earned the right to do that? Have you actually built your business in a way that's scalable and sustainable and hopefully sellable, because it would achieve those other two things by building the rigor and the support into it. And that is something to take into mind. But I also just want to say that there are certain values in your life that you just can't compromise. And for me, the 4 non-negotiables are my faith, my family, my fitness, and my finances. And when I say finances, I mean economic engine. Like, how do I apply my agency and my efforts, my passions, my purpose in order to drive value for others that creates compensation and, creates a monetary flow for the way you want to live your life. And, money is neither good nor bad. It's neutral. There's good or bad people who can do good or bad things with money. Money is like blood. It's the blood of your life to keep things moving. So I don't live to make blood, but I need blood to live. Just like that, I don't live to make money, but I need money to live. So the economic engine that helps keep that blood supply healthy is important. So those things you have to continue to try and make sure you're being as integrous as possible. And I think in particular with women, I'll talk about my wife. She is such an incredible lady. I mean, you've met her. I married way up. We've been together over 30 years. And she has stood by me through thick and thin, through some very difficult situations. And we co-founded our companies together. So we worked together. So our pillow talk was always very fascinating. We trying to separate between what was actually work, family, and just everything else. It just all blended together. But I think you're right. I think women have this extraordinary amount of additional pressure because when you're co-founding a company, you're still a wife and a mother, and you're perceived as a supporter of the home. Like, you're kind of the hub that keeps the home, the vitality of the home, really alive. And so I think in general, women feel this incredible amount of pressure that I got to be like good at all this stuff. And I think there's a lot of social pressure that, I got to look good. I got to perform at a level. It's not good enough to be a mother. Yet I say, hey, the most noble profession in the world is being a mother, because there is nothing more important than raising another human and instilling the values and the beliefs and the supports into them to allow them to thrive. So it should never be minimized. It should be fully celebrated as a massive accomplishment as a part of what we need to grow a generation who can actually be courageous and bold and inspired to achieve a better future for us. Anyways, I don't know if I answered that directly, but I feel like balance is something we're not really able to achieve. It's awareness of imbalance. Seasons of life, not all time is equal. And for women in general, it's about feeling okay that you're good enough, that you don't have to be extraordinary relative to your male counterparts. I think it's unfair pressure that a lot of women feel that I've got to do all of this. And if you have the capacity to do it and you have the supports to do it, awesome. But it's also okay to just show up and be the best version of a mother, founder, wife, support network, and or in some cases, the leader, the person who's actually going to be generating the economic engine for the home.
Yeah, and it's tough because I find, especially, this is just speaking from my experience with my friends too, is how humbled they are. And they also don't talk about this so much, the pressure of having to do it all. And And I try to encourage them, you could do more, but also it's like, but if they do take that extra 10, 20 hours a week to go work on their business or travel, then they feel guilty because somebody else has to take up the stuff that they're responsible for at home. And it's tough. And there's still that pressure. And like, I think sometimes even my parents, other incredible people, I always think like, what would my mom think if I did this? Like we went and traveled and they watched the boys for a week. And I'm like, oh, what does my mom think of this? Is she disappointed that I'm doing this? She disappointed that. So my boys make their own lunches every day for school. And arguably, they're not the best lunches. And why this started was because they're 10 years old, 11 years old now. They can do this, but they don't have a meal because they never eat a meal. They just have snacks. So we just pack a lunchbox full of mostly healthy snacks. And I remember when we left, I was telling my mom, okay, the boys make their own lunches, so don't help them. And just kind of take a quick peek to make sure that there's some sort of balance in there, but no, don't judge. Please don't judge. Still, every morning I was like, oh my God, my mom, she probably knows what's in that lunchbox and she's totally judging me because it's not like organic free range meats and vegetables. No, it's like yogurt tubes and chocolate bars and I don't know what's in there. But I know that we can control some things, which is their breakfast and their dinners. And lunch is kind of like the thing that's like, let's give them some health, but they just need to make their own lunches. So all that to say is the lunch example is the example of all of these stories that we tell ourselves because we worry about other people's judgment and it actually stops us from doing the things. And going back to what you said too, of the regrets of the dying, how 4 out of the 5 regrets were from the things that we didn't do. That's powerful. So you know what else is powerful? Is your book. Just to segue into the book, because we need to talk about this. So you have a book coming out soon in November called Startup Santa. Yep. And I know there's a big, long story about the creation of this because it goes way, way, way back in your entrepreneurial career. But kind of tell us the story behind why you wrote this book and what it's all about.
Yeah, great. Look, I didn't want to write this book. It was something that it seemed daunting for 2 reasons. It seemed really daunting to actually write a book. It's hard work. Being on the other side of it, I can now confirm, yes, it takes a lot of time and effort and energy to get into a book. But the other thing is just kind of a worthiness thing. I was like, why would it be important for me to write this book for others? The world is already pretty noisy and there's a lot of other really great thought leaders. Like, what can I add to the conversation? But I decided to land at a spot where I'm going to write a memoir just to capture some of the history, because I've had a lot of very, sort of fascinating things happen. I tell people I didn't finish a degree in university, but I have a PhD in DUMB from the School of Hard Knocks because I've done a lot of really stupid things and made all the mistakes that I think founders can expect to run into in their journey. And I just thought it would be important for me to kind of capture this. And so the unexpected great is as I was going through and starting to capture some of the memories and the stories, I found that on the other side of that, it was really cathartic. Like I found that I was healing through a lot of the damage, if you will, from the pain that I'd gone through of just going through a number of challenges in business, including bankruptcies and being fired and having, executives of mine killed tragically in New York City. So just a number of really challenging issues. And I since have learned that there's something called narrative therapy, where you just by writing out what happened and then spending time understanding it and unpacking it, that you actually start to heal. And a few of my friends, your husband included, said, hey, you need to share with me some of the stuff you're writing. And so when I did, they on this side said, this is like really helpful. This will be really impactful for the right founders. So, went from being a memoir into a book. And I had some fun with it because, again, I'm a kid. I came out of the toy business. So being playful, I said, well, how can I make this unique? How can I make it different than what's currently been done? So the idea being is that play is a part of our human development. We are playful. We're born playful. I mean, just look at little puppies. I know you guys just had a puppy, so you've seen how they're just naturally playful. And we as humans are naturally playful until we become adults. We often choose not to become that way anymore. But if you think about what play really does, it's helping with problem solving. It's helping with skills development. And it's helping develop social interactions, right? Those are the 3 things that play is constantly doing for us. And so I thought, wouldn't it be fun to be able to take iconic toys that we all know from the toy business and unpack what it is we're learning on those 3 different levels from those toys then tell a story from my experience in the toy business, typically a story of something that went wrong, because I've come to learn that success is a sucky teacher, that we tend to learn only from the challenges that we go through, and then unpack the lessons. So that was the idea behind the book. And the more I wrote, the more I felt really that this is something that I think actually is important for this time, particularly if you're a founder. I mean, this is really by a founder for founders who are starting off in their journey. And the whole idea is, how could people benefit from the wisdom of my wounds and understand the purpose behind the pain that I endured? Now, let's be clear. My pain is economic. I went through some real financial challenges. I did not go through challenges with my family and or my health. So, my father used to say to me that if money can solve your problems, it's really not a problem. And the more I think about it, the more I think that's true. Although in the moment, that lived experience of like being financially broke and trying to wrestle to keep a business alive, it feels really challenging. Yeah, relative to like trying to worry about whether my family's imploding or my health issues, it's not such a challenge. So anyways, the book has 10 lessons from 10 different toys, including stories of my life. And I think for any founder who's starting out, it'll be very cathartic to understand that they're not the only people who are experiencing these kind of problems. And perhaps there's going to be some things that they learn that they can say, wow, this can help me fast track myself past these pain points and be able to do it better. Because there's two different ways you can learn life. There's knowledge, which is learning from your own mistakes. I have a lot of that. And wisdom, which is learning from the mistakes of others and applying that to your own life so that you can just optimize it for better outcomes.
I hope you're enjoying this episode with Brad. I know it's a treat to have another man on the show. And let me tell you, there's going to be more of them going forward. And here's why. Because I've had so many incredible mentors in my life that were men. And I didn't like the fact that I wasn't including them on the show. They provide so much value. Have helped me with my career, in my marriage, as parenting. Brad is one of these people. He's an exceptional human, incredible marriage with his wife, Kelly, and is an incredibly talented entrepreneur, of which I am honored to be a vendor for him. So he hired me to do some of the PR wrapped around his book launch, to get him on podcasts, to get him in the media, and we've got him some really cool opportunities. Like I said, such an honor to be working with him. And it's something that you could actually take advantage of as well. So I've helped many authors build up strategies as well as implementation for their book launches around podcast tours, media kits, speaking points, interview questions, all the assets needed to be organized and creative in publishing your book. Because as an author, most of the work, while you think it's in writing the book, actually comes up when it comes to market the book. Beyond that, the same strategies apply for those that are launching programs or want to build their authority and a credibility in their industry. And all of this is something we offer inside both our Sidelines to Headlines PR program as well as our Authority Booster Intensive. So if you're interested in learning about any of these programs, go to wewildwomen.com to check it out. You can schedule your VIP day. We have a handful left for 2023, and our new retainer clients, we can start in the new year. So if you're interested in working with somebody on a monthly basis, we're taking on new clients at the end of December going into January. Head to wewildwomen.com to check us out. A little known fact is I'm actually helping Brad with some of his book promotion. So I'm still learning all of this stuff too, because Brad is just a man of stories. I know like one of the things that I admire the most about you is how you live your life, because you have founded many impressive companies, co-founded some that I know personally and use the products, Pela case, which is phone cases, Lomi, the compostable, how is it, the kitchen, what is it? How do you describe it again? Lomi is the...
We call it the magic dirt making machine, but I guess officially is an electronic kitchen composter that turns organic waste into a nutrient-rich supplement.
Yeah. And so there's that part of the business too. But yes, those are fascinating things. What I love is how you still show up in life. Like if you looked at your life from a 30,000 foot view, you wouldn't know that you're running these businesses in the background, that you've sold businesses for many, many figures. And you've gone through the rigor of bankruptcy to success. And I think part of that too is this this foundation you've created with a framework called the quality of life quadrant, right? So how can founders use that to be a hero and not a victim or a bystander in growing their businesses?
Yeah, thanks. This is a great question. And again, this is part of, like, my coach tells me, we don't learn from what happens in life. We learn from taking the time to reflect on what happens. And that's a lot of truth, right? Like, if we just go through life and live life and never take the time to reflect, we're having a superficial experience, right? To really get the most value, you need to stop, recall, reflect, and unpack. So part of the thinking is this, is that as founders, we all start off in the same place. Yeah. We have an idea. Now we've used our imagination, our curiosity to come up with ideas. Then we developed a business plan that hopefully is different, not better, because I usually tell people that if it's better, now you're comparing yourself to something else, and that usually means the opportunity is somewhat limited. So hopefully it's just different in terms of how you're solving the problem. And then most importantly, you have to have the courage to, like, lean in and try. And on the other side of courage to trying, you're going to have challenges. That's just a part of the deal. And when you face those challenges, there's kind of three different ways you can go. There's three different paths that you can expect to go. So the first path is you become a victim. And this is basically a mentality of, this happened to me, and I am affected by what has happened. I had no control over it, but I'm affected by it. I was dealt a bad hand. And on the other side of that are what I call the 4Bs. So number one, you're blind. You're blind to the fact that you think you're the only person that this has happened to, that you don't see how you co-created this event, that you just choose to be blind. You're blaming, right? You're blaming the situation. You're giving it the power instead of owning the power. So it was the thing that caused this, right? You become begrudging. Like, you start comparing yourself to others. And that's the worst. I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt said that comparison is the thief of joy. And it's part of the reason why I personally don't spend a lot of time on social media, just because it's a constant comparison, and you're constantly comparing your back of stage to somebody else's front of stage, which is never fair, right? Because all your warts and all, right? But the other people just showing this shiny, projected, everything's great life. But that, unfortunately, it creates begrudging feelings towards others.
My dad says that jealousy is the ugliest emotion.
Oh, it is.
And I'm like, well, I don't want to be ugly.
Right.
So let's
it shows
not
up
be
in your
jealous.
face, right? Like, people with joy, you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
People with bitterness, you can see it, which is my fourth one, bitterness. Bitterness is poison. Literally, something, if you put bitter in your mouth and it tastes bitter, your face reacts accordingly. And likewise, bitterness is something that poisons you. And it comes as a result of being a victim. And Nelson Mandela, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he basically said, becoming bitter and holding a grudge against someone else is like drinking poison, hoping to inflict harm on your opponent or your enemy. And the only person you're actually harming is yourself, right?
That's intense.
I mean, so those are the 4Bs that associate with being a victim. So that is one option, okay? The other option is to become a bystander, all right? And this is somebody who, again, they start off, they've got their dreams, inspirations. They work through those initial challenges, and they make some progress. They actually advance their business, they advance their idea, but they just get wore down, right? They just start to, like, feel like this is too hard. I've been able to create an economic engine that I can support myself, but I'm going to choose to not lean into this anymore. I'm going to choose to stand on the sideline and watch and become a commentator. And the way that I feel better about myself is I pursue the 4Ps. Okay. So the 4Ps, and these actually, we can unpack this. This is a big one. These are actually identified as the 4 idols, things that are, I would call, godlike, that we're trying to replace what we're truly meant to chase in life. But those are power, prestige, possessions, and pleasure. And actually, if you go back in time, this is like, many famous philosophers actually identify these as kind of like the 4 original sins, if you will, right? So the power that I have the ability to, like, control others, and I use it and I abuse it. Possessions, money, cars, all the things that come along with just trying to have material possessions. We start chasing that. Prestige, fame, notoriety, being put in a position of honor when you go to an event. And finally, pleasure. Well, I mean, it's pretty self-evident, whether I'm over-consuming in food, alcohol, drugs, sex, I mean, all the above, right? And those things on their own are not terrible, but they should be a byproduct of achievement, not the focus. And if you choose to focus on them, they actually become never satiated. You will continue to chase them. It's just like a person, I've never taken heroin, but as I understand it, if you take your first hit of heroin, every hit thereafter will never be as good as that first one. And you're constantly chasing to try and get back to that initial feeling and sensation you had. And therefore, it's bigger and bigger doses. So, you think about it like I bought myself a nice car and for a week or two was great. And now I got to go to the next one. And suddenly I'm like talking about cars that quite frankly, I probably can't afford, but I'm going to buy them. And I become part of those people who know it all, show it all, and owe it all because they're chasing.
Oh man, guilty of this. I just bought myself a car in May and I love it. But then I saw a similar version of what I had with better rims. And all of a sudden now I didn't want my car anymore. And I'm like, well, wait, that's silly. But there's also like, in understanding this, there's also so much pressure that we probably consciously and unconsciously don't know about keeping up with the Joneses in all of this.
Comparison, right? Comes back to that, which is never good. The only person you should compare to is the better version of yourself. You should imagine yourself 10 years from now, what you're going to be thinking, doing, saying, and believing, and start aspiring to do the things today to get to that and compare yourself to how you can become that person. Because you're the only version of you. And by the way, there's never been anyone like you in the past. There'll never be anyone like you in the future. So the only job you have is to be the best version of yourself. And when you spend time thinking about others, you're setting up a false pretense and a false economy around how you can actually become that. You can be inspired by others, which is great. Seeing other people actually do things and inspiring you to want to lean into that for yourself is great. But the comparison piece is where you start to go down the path of being bitter and begrudging, and that's just never helpful. So the bystander life is one that, again, they're basically pulled out of play. They're doing the bare minimum and they're trying to make up for it by just pursuing power, prestige, possessions, or pleasure, right? So finally, the fourth is the champion, the hero. And these are people that are highly engaged in life and also seeing a high level of satisfaction. And that's because they're living in effect versus at cause, that they are continuing to expand the possibilities, mostly by living outside their comfort zone, which isn't necessarily taking big risks. It's small things every day. It could be just like Dan turning down the the cold plunge just a few degrees colder, right? But he's exploring the possibilities. It's creating more discomfort. But guess what? He's discovering he can actually go longer. That's just understanding it. But the most important thing is that they're focused on the 4 C's, things that really bring out the best for humanity. And the 4 C's are challenges, contributions, which come in the form of creativity and or charity. And finally, to me, the fourth, the most important, is connections, meaningful connections with people that matter.
Wait, I got 3: challenges, contribution.
So challenges, contributions, which come in the form of charity and or creativity, where you're creating something, writing a book, painting art, building a business, all that's a part of creativity. And then the final is connections, right? Meaningful connections with people. And it sounds kind of maybe trite to just say, oh, those 4 C's, that's where it really, makes the difference. But I would challenge your listeners to think about their best, give me their top memories of the last year. And in most cases, I would hear things like, well, we went on a family vacation. I completed a marathon. My husband and I had this amazing, date night or experience together, right? So I think you think about it, not a single one of those has anything to do with the 4 P's. It's not about power, prestige, pleasure, possessions. It's about a meaningful connection with somebody who matters in your life. It's about accomplishing a challenge that you didn't expect or that pushed you to your possibilities. Or it's about giving of yourself without expecting anything in return, a charitable outreach in some capacity. And so if that's true, if those are the most meaningful memories, then why are we not spending more time there? Because the reason we're not is that society is telling us you're not enough. And they understand that we're going to be actually motivated by the 4 P's. And that's why you see advertisements that basically say, hey, you could be more than you could possibly be if you own this car, you buy these shoes, if you, have this vacation. And like I said, those things on their own are not bad if they're a byproduct of chasing the 4 C's. Like, great example. Last weekend, Dan and I went mountain biking together. We challenged ourselves to terrain that we'd never done before. We built a meaningful connection together. We did all kinds of things that were all about the 4 Cs, created incredible memories. But we did it while also enjoying as a byproduct these 4 Ps that, we flew in a cool helicopter, we rode really cool mountain bikes, ate amazing food at this lodge. But it wasn't what we were chasing. We weren't chasing that. That was a byproduct of chasing the other things, the Cs.
Yeah, I love that. And you had an extra guest in your room, I heard. A ghost. Dan has not yet told me the story, but
yes, we did.
I don't think he wants to.
Yes.
I love these. Can you replay the 4 quadrants again?
Yeah. So we all start off as founders, early start founders, right? And we have the opportunity to become one of 3 people. And we may be these people at certain parts of our life, right? So victims, right? Who are in the 4Bs. Bystanders, who are on the 4Ps. Or champions, who are focused on the 4Cs. That's the opportunity and the optionality. And you choose. You choose the path, knowing that one of those paths ultimately allows you to not just live a life where you survive, but ultimately where you thrive and live life to the full.
I love it. I can see there are moments when I kind of drop in and out of all of these. But I think being aware of it is also very important because then you can just work on that the next time.
Agreed.
Okay, this has been so amazing. I have one last question for you. I typically ask my guests is, what does it feel like to be a wild woman? But we talked about this before pressing record, and you said, no, I still want to ask that question. And I love it. It's so beautiful. So what do you think it means for a woman to be wild?
My wife is such an inspiration for me in my life, and I would consider her a wild woman because she lives life to the full. That she is very much that Jim Rohn quote, in life you may not be able to do all you find out, but make sure you find out all you can do. She really lives a life to the full. But she recognizes that her most important contribution is to supporting and building our family. And what I so appreciate about her, and I've come up with this, if I took her and think about how she inspires our kids, I've come up with this acronym called LIVE. How do you live your life? And the first L stands for you need to love unconditionally. That doesn't mean you necessarily approve of everything, right? Like unconditional love doesn't necessarily mean unconditional approval. But you definitely need to have love that's not conditional. It can't be based upon your degree, how you perform. It's got to be something that you truly feel is based upon just that they are your kids. The second is the I of LIVE stands for inspiration. Your child needs to know that you are living your best life. Because the most damaging thing you can do for your children is not live your life to the full. The most damaging thing for kids is the unlived life of their parents. I'm a big believer in that. V, and this is one I've had to spend a lot of time working on because it stands for vulnerability, and that's not something that came natural to me. It's something I've had to work on. But what I see with her is that she has lived a life of truly being vulnerable and transparent, understanding that her kids need to know that she's human, she struggles, she's on a journey. This is the first time she's done this as well. she hasn't come back to repeat this. This is her first time. And along the way, she's going to make mistakes. And your kids need to know that they're interdependent with you as a part of their growth. And finally, E stands for experience. And this has dual meaning. The first is coming back to, like we talked about, making connections. So making connections really comes down to experiences that matter, like creating meaningful moments. You hear me talk about M3. We want to make magic memories, increasing them in frequency and intensity. That is actually one of the things my wife and I love to do. And so we're constantly being very intentional about ensuring that we've created those experiences. But the second piece of this is to not become a bulldozer for your kids' problems. They need to learn from their experiences as well, right? They need to go through challenges. Your challenges are going to build your character, right? Your struggles become your strength. And we don't want to rob them of the ability, in fact, to be doing them disharm. So when I think about being a wild woman, I think of my wife, and I think that she truly lives her life to the full, to the extent that I just explained how live can really be done in a way that's impactful for both you and your family.
Yeah, Kelly is amazing. She is just an incredible human being. I don't think I've ever not seen her smile. Does she ever get angry? or frustrated or upset?
Well,
I don't think I've ever seen it.
well,
yes,
it's exceptional, but yeah, it happens. She's human.
Yeah. No, she is the sweetest woman. Okay. So if people are interested in purchasing a copy of your book or finding you online, where can they go?
Well, a few things. Number one, they can go to bradpedersen.com, and that's spelled Pedersen. Most people spell it with the T's and O's, but anyways, it's slightly different. So you can find out more about me there. And the book is coming out the first week in November. So startupsantabook.com. And we've put some, actually, if you sign up, we'll give you the first chapter free so you can get a taste of what it's like. We're also created some free videos and resources and tools and things like that I think will be helpful as you journey through the book, which will hopefully help inspire you to just be a better founder.
Yeah, I love it. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Renee, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
So there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Into the Wild. To make this girl happy and to help reach other women who are dreaming of starting their business, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and everywhere you listen in. Also, if you want to find me in the wild, check me out on Instagram at Renee_Warren. That's RENEE_WARREN. And leaving you with one of my favorite tips of all time: the best advice you could ever receive is from someone who has successfully done it before you. Until next time, ladies, peace out.